Someone else will do it for me. Thank you. And I'd like to begin by providing a little bit of context for today's event. So each year, the Geography and Earth Sciences junior faculty host a free speaker series to highlight all stages of research, with work spanning the many disciplines, degrees, and interests that comprise the department, including but not limited to urban and regional planning, ecology, meteorology and climate modeling, hydrologic sciences, food and human geographies, and socio-ecological systems science. And this year, the GES speaker series highlights scholars and researchers whose work engages with or has connections to environmental justice, community planning and engagement, and social environmental interactions. Today's event is co-sponsored by the Charlotte Action Research Project, which is housed within the Department of Geography and Earth Sciences. And I'll turn it over to the center's director, Dr. Colleen Hamelman, to say a few words about CHARP.
Thank you very much. We're very excited to be able to sponsor the today's speaker event and hear from Dr. Chitiyo about her work. So the Charlotte Action Research Project, as Dr. Itzrich mentioned in the department here, has been around for about 11 years with a focus on integrating teaching, research, and action in pursuit of social justice, enabling neighborhoods to advocate for themselves, and bolstering sustainable neighborhood coalitions. And so we take a very community engaged approach to research and building partnerships with those working to better neighborhoods and communities in the Charlotte region. And so we see, I think, some alignment with what we're going to hear today as well, and thinking about how we create change even within our university campuses and not just what's happening beyond our borders. So thrilled to be able to be a part of this today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hamelman. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. So we are very excited to be joined today by Dr. Plaxedes Chitiyo, who is a Zimbabwe native and an academic professional in the Department of Geography, Environment, and Sustainability at UNC Greensboro, as well as Associate Director for the Environment and Sustainability Program. She is also a faculty advisor of the student-run campus sustainability grant program called the Green Fund. Her research is centered around urban agriculture, where through collaborative efforts, she explores ways of promoting just, equitable, and sustainable food systems. Economic, race, and gender-based disparities characterize our current food systems, and they in turn manifest as food insecurity, food apartheid, and food deserts in minority communities. Her research, therefore, seeks to address these challenges by exploring ways to establish community partnerships that create sustainable food systems to not only provide healthy food that is nutritious and culturally appropriate, but also to promote environmental protection and to enhance the livelihood of people within the communities. Prior to joining UNC Greensboro's Geography, Environment, and Sustainability Department, Dr. Chitiyo was an assistant professor at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where she did collaborative work with urban and community gardens and farms, as well as nonprofit organizations to address food insecurity and food apartheid issues in Pittsburgh inner city neighborhoods. She was part of the steering committee involved in developing the Food Action Plan for Pittsburgh and the greater Pittsburgh area, an initiative led by the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. Dr. Chitiyo currently serves as a member of the Greensboro Community Food Task Force and Food Matters Zimbabwe. So welcome, Dr. Chitiyo. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for this opportunity. It is really an honor to be here, and I'm really excited to be able to connect and also share some of my experiences working in Pittsburgh as well as here in North Carolina. So let me just share my screen. Can you all see the slides? Okay, all right. Okay, so my topic today is looking at cultivating sustainability game changers in higher education, and it's one of those areas that I'm actually now getting into, based on my experiences. And so I'll be talking about, one aspect is in academic professional, I wear many hats. So I'm like, as you heard from the introduction, an academic professional. I'm also an associate director for the program. So I'm involved with curriculum and assessment, but I'm also an advisor to some of our students. And I'm also a mom, I'm a wife. I work with different communities. And so I wear these many hats, and doing a reflection really on where I started from. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, to where I was a student. So I was on the other side where some of us who are on this panel are, you're a student, to where I'm now on the other side and saying, okay, what are some of the things that we can actually do to promote sustainability in higher education? So I'll start with a story. So my story starts at Africa University, as you see on this screen. This is Africa University, where I did my undergraduate degree. And actually the Department of Agriculture is way down here. So I just got this from their website. This is an aerial view. And where I come from in Mutare, Zimbabwe, is actually known as Kumakomoyo, which means that area where it's mountainous. It's beautiful. It's a mountainous area. So I just want to show you. So Africa University is actually just, it's right here. So we're actually like 30 minutes from Chimoio, which is Mozambique, and it's 11 miles from the city of Mutare. So that's where I started my my undergraduate program, and I was excited. I did a bachelor's in agriculture and natural resources management. So for some of like looking at here in the US, I had a minor in natural resources management, and I was looking forward to a career in working for maybe a national park or conservation. And I was excited because those people who were ahead of us were coming back at the university, driving nice cars, and they had money. And I was like, I'm tired being a student. I can't wait to go and do all these things that we've been learning at school. But then something happened a year before I graduated. This is what happened. In 2000, so I graduated in 2001. In 2000, this is what happened. There was a fast leg redistribution program in Zimbabwe. It was highly politicized, and doing a reflection now, looking at as I was going through my undergraduate program, we never talked about the elephant in the room. We never talked about the equity issues that existed in our country. And here I was doing a degree in agriculture. We never talked about why 10% of the population owned prime agricultural land. Zimbabwe, on the other side, was known as the breadbasket of Africa. So looking at 10 to 20% of our GDP coming from agriculture. And then to see this thing happening where the government told those commercial farms that we are taking the land, whether you like it or not. And so these are some of the images that were popping up in newspapers and news. And all of a sudden, when I graduated, all my dreams, so working on those, those conservation areas, they were managed by some of these white farmers. All of a sudden, what I had been trained to, like a predictable career, either working on a commercial farm or the conservation areas, came crashing, right? I did not know what to do. So the land was being taken, jobs that were available were actually going out. So I remember one time looking at the job adverts in the newspaper, land officer, to go and demarcate that land that was taken, that used to be a commercial farm that was taken, so that I can, demarcate certain sections for that was being redistribution to landless Zimbabweans. I was not equipped. I later on got a job working in Mashonaland East, which is the prime agricultural area for our country. It's just like your Iowa here. I got a job there. I did not have civic engagement skills. I was working with women. They were excited to see me, but it was like learning on the job. there were a lot of issues that I wish I had known about, I had skills to deal with. Sometimes I found it was very overwhelming for me. But some of you might say, well, the education system in Zimbabwe is different from the education system in the United States. We certainly are preparing our students very well for their careers. So fast forward, I am here in the United States. I joined my then boyfriend, husband now, and we're living in Tennessee. I got this opportunity to pursue a master's in biology. And so I was looking at removal of simazine, which is a herbicide, and it's found in most of our drinking water sources here in the United States. So using different substrates in the lab. And again, looking at, okay, so yes, we can use these different substrates. We can use peat moss, we can use gravel, we can use different combinations. But again, in my mind, maybe never questioning, okay, what's the bigger picture here? Why are the farmers using so much of these herbicides? Well, came later to find that, there are subsidies, right? Farmers are growing all this, the corn, lots of corn, and there are subsidies for them to be able to do the unsustainable farming practices that they're engaging in. And fast forward, Southern Illinois University, I'm doing a PhD in environmental resources and policy. I am very grateful of the opportunities that I've had, from my undergraduate degree to my PhD. Looking at, actually my dissertation was looking at environmental policies that were governing alternative agriculture in Zimbabwe. And it was great for me to be able to delve deeper in looking at those issues. But I still felt that equity piece, when I look back, I'm like, gosh, maybe if I had taken an environmental justice course, maybe a social justice course, as I was doing these things, I could have looked at a different, it could have enriched my experience. That is what I think when I do this reflection. I'm not minimizing the experiences that I've had, but when I look back, I also see some gaps. There were some blind spots from the time when I was at Africa University to the time when I graduated with my PhD. And some of these that actually magnified had to do with equity. And I found myself, after finishing my PhD, I found myself now in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, I was tasked to design courses I was in the Center for Environment and Research, the environmental science program at Duquesne University. And so I kind of started just going into the community and interacting with the community members, the community gardens, looking at what was the urban agriculture scene like. And this actually came out of someone asking me, like, where are all the community gardens in Pittsburgh? And I ended up working with a student who actually helped map location of some of these community gardens. And you can see most of them are, central Pittsburgh, where you also find a lot of the non-profit organizations that are promoting sustainability, or also located as well. And you also find that that's where you find some of the areas where the median incomes are low as well. Actually, the Duquesne campus is like 0.6 miles. It's like when you walk out from the campus, like 0.6 mile, you are in a food desert right there. And so those are some of the things I found myself now dealing with after I finished my PhD. And fast forward through those connections, looking at, what I could expose the students out in experiential learning, resulted in those networks that actually helped me to be connected to the Greater Pittsburgh Food Action Plan. And this is a flyer of, some of the listening sessions that we actually had in 2019. And I must say that this Food Action Plan was passed in 2020, September 2020, and it's being rolled out. And, I found myself working with, different communities. So this was in 2019. The Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Redding, for Pennsylvania, having a listening session. So this was an urban agriculture tour, talking to a community garden in the area. And this is the mayor for the area. So saying, okay, what are the issues? They just launched a 500,000 urban agriculture grant to help community gardens. And this particular community garden is actually in a low-income neighborhood. Found myself working with some students going out to different gardens around the city to help out with spring. So this was actually preparation for spring planting. But some of the students actually ended up doing projects. So this particular project was working with a nonprofit establishing backyard gardens for, again, in some of those areas where there's food insecurity. So if we're to look at, so the problem that we have in our world now is we are dealing with a lot of challenges. For example, COVID-19 pandemic, we are still struggling to get ourselves out. And then we have this climate crisis, is highlighted by Vanessa Nakate, a climate activist from Uganda. We are facing the same storm, but we are definitely in different boats. As many boats are still strong and can continue to sail, other boats are already sinking, other boats are already on fire. So it is time to pay attention to voices, to people, to activists, to communities that are on the front lines of the climate crisis. And right now, the COP27 is taking place in Egypt until November 18th. And conversations, I've just been following like some of the headlines, some African countries saying, yes, you are saying the developed nations are saying we are going to cut our carbon, we are going to do this. Yes, that's good. But guess what? We want you to pay us for the damage that you already have caused in our countries as far as moving forward. So those are some of the conversations that are taking place and the challenges that we are actually facing. So how do we better prepare our students beyond that degree? And like my mindset that I had 20 years ago of getting a well-paying job, and better prepare them that they are able to engage in the society that we are living in, that has all these challenges that we are facing, that we need to come together and work together and solve these problems. So it goes beyond just looking at the scores, the GRE, the SAT, but looking at the house skills. So David Orr is a well-known researcher and scholar, and he works around sustainability. And so this is a quote from one of his book chapters, where he says, this generation must restore natural capital of soils, forests, watersheds, and wild areas, clean up the toxic messes from the expansionist phase, build habitable cities, relearn the practices of good farming, and learn the arts of powering civilizations on efficiency and sunlight. And we find ourselves that this is where institutes of higher learning, higher education institutions come in. We are coming in and saying we also want to be part of the conversations in trying to address all these challenges that we are facing. And then this idea of education for sustainable development. It then touches on things like the critical thinking skills that we are instilling in our students, the problem solving, addressing equity issues that are existing within our society, and acquiring the appropriate knowledge. And we are looking at this as educating future leaders and really plugging in to also global things that are taking place. So the Sustainable Development Goals, we know we have 17, and one of them is quality education, which is number 4. And according to UNESCO, they actually say, once we get number 4 right, it has cascading effects on gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, to climate action, to building those partnerships that we envision for all of these goals. And of course, universities are focusing on different areas in this quest to promote education for sustainable development. It could be through institutional framework, it could be through education, research, campus operations, outreach, and collaboration on on-campus life experiences and assessment and reporting, which is great. We have the Association for Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, ASHI. We have higher education sustainability initiative through the UN. So all those things, they are actually, ways of promoting education for sustainable development. And we find that ESD is explicitly recognized as part of the SDGs in target 4.7. I'm just going to read how this is framed. So ensure that all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. But then this question comes, okay, what is sustainability? So if I were to do a poll right now and ask everyone who's in the virtual space, what is the definition of sustainability, I'll probably get different responses. So some of you might say, making sure that we have something that goes on indefinitely, some of you might even define it just using the word sustain again. But I think this also brings about, this question also makes us think about, okay, if we're going to move forward with education for sustainability or sustainable development, we also need to kind of define what this means to us, right? So businesses are using the term. We are hearing businesses and companies say, oh, we are being sustainable, this is what we are doing. And so I think, so this actually, on this idea of defining what sustainability is, UNCG in their strategic plan in 2009 came up with their own definition, and realizing that they are an institution of learning. They are not a company, they are not Starbucks. So Starbucks might say, we are going to do the triple bottom line. So just looking at environment, economics, and society. But because we are an institute of higher learning, we are not there to make profit, but we are actually pouring into future generations who are coming through our institution. And so that definition includes, it's actually saying academics, operations, and outreach are conducted with careful attention to the enduring interconnectedness of social equity, the environment, the economy, and aesthetics. And the aesthetics piece comes in really realizing that sometimes we have this four-leaf clover that we talk about, and you find that sometimes when we look at these environmental issues, like I go back to the climate crisis, there's ethics that's involved. So when I talk about aesthetics, some people might think about beauty, but aesthetics encompasses our perceptions, right? Using our five senses, what we see, smell, touch. But then it also touches on what we value as humans, what are our worldviews. Is religion shaping the way we are treating our planet? And so what this then brings about is, saying that all those aspects, so this image is showing, so the environment is actually the biggest leaf here, and you have the leaf, the sun, and the water, because everything else depends on it. And then you also have the equity piece. So there are people who are supposed to be, we're not going to give everyone the same thing. There are people who are going to be propped up because of where they are, so that they're able to be successful. And education is key to doing that. We find equity issues around transportation. And then we have this one, which is talking about the economy in some of the things that we are actually doing on our campus, like, LED lighting, recycling, and those connections to the globe. And then the lastly is the one that shows that aesthetics, where we are looking at how we perceive the world, which also governs connected to our morals. And I must say that the equity piece is very hard. Even if we were to look at since the Brundtland report on sustainable development was passed, to where we are now talking about sustainable development goals, the equity piece it's like, pulling teeth. And the reason why it's like that, it's because it touches on our morals, on our ethics, on what we value. And, as human beings, sometimes we don't want to change. We hold on to our beliefs and how we're raised and what we believe in. And so that makes it that piece very hard. But then I must say, I would like to say that on defining that sustainability, it is about change. We have to change the way we are doing things. Our world is changing around us. And so we cannot stay at the same position, is what we are saying, also looking at education for sustainable development. We are not going to have our students coming through our colleges the way that they did 30 years ago. And it's actually encouraging to see many universities saying, you know what, they're joining ASHI, they're doing all these things to make sure that we are better preparing our students for that career, to be able to solve some of these problems that we are facing. And even some scholars realizing that there needs to be that transformation in learning. But then you also find that, again, we are not all created equal. There are some institutions, there's a lot of research that has been done in the global north, but not so much in the global south. They are, whilst we have institutions like the ASHI, some universities, for example, in Africa, they might not necessarily be joined to those organizations, but they are doing it. They're doing some of these things. It's not just that it's not on here. And so there's this study that I highlight. There are some people who say, so Philo has done a lot of work around education for sustainable development. And they did a qualitative study with the 7 countries and found out that this concept has not been sufficiently integrated in some higher education institutions. Even though we do have, some support services through ASHI, you become a member and things like that. But the idea that, there's need for us to also reflect on our own actions and act in complex situations as we move in new directions. So some might ask, how does this work? What does this look like? What does education for sustainability look like? So as an academic professional, I work with outside organizations a lot. I'm working with the community a lot, and I mentor students, I advise students on internships, I do some research, I teach. I am connected and work with different faculty from different departments. You saw that leaf for sustainability that I showed you, 4-leaf clover. And I also shared that I'm part of the curriculum and assessment committee. It's actually made up from people from other faculty, from other disciplines, social work, sociology, peace and conflict studies. So working together and saying, okay, how can we move forward and create a curriculum that is actually better able to advance education for sustainable development? And UNESCO is actually part of the bigger organizations that are promoting this, that saying that we are not only looking at integrating some of these things in our classrooms or in our curriculum, but we want something that is more interactive, learner-centered, and even looking at the settings as necessary for the transformation of what we are doing. So looking at education for sustainable development, I just wanted to share, I thought I would just share how, what it looks like to me, right? And how I try to incorporate it in the work that I do as an instructor. So I have 3 courses that I teach. Global agriculture is an experiential course. So we look at, here in Greensboro, what does urban agriculture look like? Of course, we have local actions, but they are connected to global to global connections as well. So it's hands-on. It has a service component. So we meet every Thursdays from 2 to 4:40. So usually, let's say we go on a farm for a field visit. We'll do 30 to 45 minutes of field tour, and then we switch to helping the farm or the garden on what they need help with. And so it's something that is local. And connecting our students to the local community, but also for them to get to experience. And it's really connected to the concept. So if we're looking at soils that previous week, I would let the farmer know that, hey, we looked at soils. Can you maybe highlight a little bit more on soils and how you manage your soils when we come out on Thursday? And that's how we do it. But then when I talk about some of the things that some of the issues that we find in, for example, in agriculture, like farm workers working under harsh conditions, it resonates with the students because they got to do it. They got to engage in these exercises. They get to help the farmers. And they also, in turn, when they write their report, give me feedback on how I can do things better. So sometimes I am, I can give you an example. I am a Black woman. And so like, if we are going to a Black neighborhood, I have so many assumptions. I'm, maybe the students will let me know, hey, Dr. Chitiyo, yes, we went to that place, but did you know that, such a thing about the place, or I was not comfortable, you did not prepare me enough, or things like that. And so it's kind of self-reinforcing. So the feedback, that elevating that student voice, but also for them to kind of also see what it looks like in their local area. And then an upper level course, like environmental policy course, even the project is kind of local, right? So I might like let them work on environmental policy issue, like what is it this like in North Carolina in terms of water pollution or the Clean Water Act and things like that. And also bringing people who have experience into the classroom for them to be able to talk to them. And then lastly, the intro to sustainability class. It's a very, it's an intro class, a 100 level class. And I connect this with my role as, an advisor for the Green Fund, maybe have them, I co-teach with another colleague here, and we have them work on maybe apply for a grant. This is a skill that they'll need when they go out there. So they actually apply, follow the guidelines for what is required at UNCG and work on that. Some videos to highlight some of these issues, and even do some site visits on some of the campuses, looking at some of the campus sustainability initiatives that we have. So I'm just going to go through some of the places that we have actually gone with the class. So this is a school in Greensboro. And what's unique about this school is all the children who are coming from outside the US who need ESL, English as a second language, come to this school, and they learn English. But then the parents many years ago decided that they wanted to have a space where they could come and grow food, right? And so this is actually being used as a tool for the students to learn about, science, soils, but also to grow food. And, we have kind of partnered with the school where we come in, we help out with what needs to be helped out with, but we're also looking into maybe having some of our students working on certain projects. Already the university has some people working with from social work, working with some of the students as well. And this is farm, Congolina farm, the owner of this farm. So this is the husband, and the wife was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they moved back to the United States, stayed there for a long time, moved back to the United States and bought this piece of land, and found out that there were people from the Democratic Republic of Congo who were living in Greensboro, said, okay, we are going to devote. So what you see behind here is what they're actually devoting for the Congolese, so that they can grow their native crops like cassava, some vegetables, and things like that. So they offer them that space. And on the other side, they are just doing their growing of vegetables. They also have adjacent to the farm some solar panels, and they bring in, again, the connections that they have in the community, where they have, someone with goats coming in, instead of having someone mow, the goats come in and they get rid of all the grass and things like that. So this is when we went there this semester, we planted some collard greens. And of course, the students were like, oh, Dr. Chitiyo, my back is killing me. I can't remember the length of this bed, but it was long. By the time we're done, we were tired, but we were excited that we were able to help out. And I must say, Ray and his wife are the only ones who operate this farm. It's huge. And they have a lot of produce that they take to the farmers market. But it was just great to see the students, even outside the classroom, talking to each other, having conversations that they would not normally have in the classroom. And also to get feedback from Ray saying, you know what, when I saw those students here, it reminded me when I was a college student. And so building those relationships are very important, but also, the students are learning. We planted 600 strawberries last week. And so this farm serves, it has members, it's run by a church, but they have a significant population, congregation members from East Africa. So Tanzania, Sudan, Kenya, and so they actually have an area that they devote that to, but they also have a free farmers market. They started this during COVID. where they applied money through the CARES Act and started a free farmers market. And we have, so actually Kayla is working on a project. She got funding from UNCG to pursue a research project looking at their free farmers market that they've been doing since 2020, because she's interested in getting into a career of public policy. And we also have another student who graduated a couple years ago who's coming back and helping out at the free farmers market. So they actually are contracting farmers of color to come in and bring their produce. So they already have a market at their church parking lot, and people get tokens, 30 tokens every week, where you actually go and buy high quality food. So they actually devote growing. So these strawberries are going to be sold at the farmers market next year. And, you know, they have hoop houses to grow the different vegetables that they actually are taking to these communities that are food insecure. This is a community garden that is established in a park. So it's adjacent to a park, and it's managed by the city of Greensboro. And just also for the students to see what you know, urban agriculture looks like, right? And you know, one of the highlights here is, you know, people who are living with disabilities who are wheelchair bound can also participate in gardening by having such structures installed as well. And you know, composting is being done inside. They go to participate in layering everything in the compost, and as well as preparing those beds that were being letting lie fallow until next spring when planting starts again. The highlight for us this year was the workshop, the poultry processing workshop. I wasn't sure when I was talking to this particular farmer earlier on about us, how we could visit their farm. And then they said, actually, I'm having a poultry processing workshop. Why don't you bring your students? And so we went, and again, when I explained to the students in class that this is, I have 12 students in the class, and some of them said, you know, the sight of blood will make me faint. I'm not going to go. But for others, they were like, okay, I'll go and kind of participate in the whole process. So we did a tour of the farm. And you can see here, so we ended up naming this chicken nugget. It was not slaughtered because it kind of bonded with everyone. We're passing it around. But, you know, one of the things that we saw here is, so they already put some of the chickens that were going to be processed that day, and they use these cages to move around the pastures, to fertilize the pastures. So this one is kind of compacted because it's getting cooler, so you know, it helps the chickens to keep warm. And this one is for the summer where there's more air, so they move them accordingly. And this is kind of one of the things where we actually cutting up the chickens and everything. And of course, just using things on the farm. And I think for this one, the students got to hear. So there's a difference. The farmer was saying there's a difference in seeing pictures on Instagram. You know how, you know, you go on Instagram, you see these big pictures about a bucolic farm with, you know, everything, and someone saying, oh, we get everything on the farm, it's 100% sustainable. Well, they have to improvise. You can see that these are the cones you find, you know, Department of Transportation along the roads, you know, when they're doing construction, and they just cut them up because they work very well. When you're slaughtering chickens, they are flexible. The chicken gets in there, it's really comfortable. And we are doing everything on open air, right? I must say, we learned everything from management of a past to the history of the land, right? That the land belonged to the Native Americans, to when, you know, it was passed through the generations, and, you know, the whole thing about industrialized agriculture that was done on the farm to where they are now, and to anatomy and physiology. You know, you can actually see a student opening up the chicken, you know, they're getting instructions and identifying all the different things in the gut, to where we actually package the chickens. So everyone got to take home the chicken that they slaughtered. And the farm owner told us, don't put anything in the chicken. It's just salt and black pepper. And I must say, the chicken was really good. So I did a post-poetry workshop survey, so just to kind of get the sense, because some of the students, when they were like, oh, I'm not sure, I just watch. Some of them did participate, and they were able to make those connections. So like, the 4 leaves of sustainability that I've talked about, some of the, all of them saying, you know what, we definitely recommend this for next year. And these are some of the areas that they felt the workshop touched on. So it was not just talking about sustainable agriculture, it was the soils. How do we enhance our soil fertility? The animal ethics. Some of them anticipated the slaughtering of the chickens to be gruesome and to have lots of blood. There wasn't a lot of blood. Actually, we had to learn to locate the jugular vein, and it was a quick process. And before you know it, it was like, oh, wow, it's done. And so all these areas is some of the areas that they highlighted that they did was covered with the workshop. And then, so I asked them, what was your experience like? So some of them saying, you know what, I really enjoyed this, to see organic alternative to industrial animal agriculture, seeing chicken processing from firsthand. And for some of them to say it was an eye-opening experience. And some had actually slaughtered chickens. I had slaughtered chickens in Zimbabwe growing up, get a chicken, you're preparing for a meal, but the technique that was used here was really different from what I was used to. And even really tied into, the farmer went in talking about the ethics that, they take these chickens through and make sure that they respect them even to the end when they slaughter them as well. And there was a very, they were very funny. They interacted with the students very well, and they ended up, with nicknames and, laughing the whole way. And it was really, we really enjoyed this workshop. But then we find that some of them say, you know what, we had misconceptions. I thought it would be a quick thing. We go to the workshop. We ended up staying for the grader. We started at 9. I think we left around 3. It was a long process. So again, showing that, some of these things we talk about in class, well, to actually do it, takes time and a lot of planning. And this is what gets into also when you go to the farmer's market and you find that chicken going for like $5 a pound, where this is coming from. From the way they take care of the chicken to the way they process. There's a lot of labor that's involved. And so some of these over the years, what I've noticed is, so these visits that we do to the farms and the experiential learning and the service that I'm also plugged in as a teacher, as an instructor, has some also impacts in the class because I pull in also the students. So for example, the first garden at Duquesne, a student just came, she was taking the class and it's like, I want to get into regenerative design, architecture. She was planning to graduate and go to study regenerative design, architecture at another college. And so I connected her with a partner in the area in the Pittsburgh, and so she was able. We noticed that so we identified this section for community garden on campus, and every time it rained, all of the behind here, all the mulch, everything would be all over here, and so was able to install the. She applied for a grant, able to get money to buy this rain barrel, and of course, this is what it looks like forward, 3 years later. And this is part of the garden as well. Now I was talking to one of my colleagues there and they said, oh, wow, the garden is running. We are, sending some of that food back into the community. Some of it is shared through the campus pantry. And I talked of that example, student volunteering at the farmer's market and becoming also community garden members. I actually had one of the students coming and talking to the students in a class as a guest lecture this semester. And so just starting off, saying, okay, what can I do? I have all this information. What can I give back to my community? How can I work together with my community to make things better? I had a few weeks ago, I had a guest lecturer come and talk about indoor farming. So trying to expose them to the other types of farming that are there. Yes, we've gone to the garden. Yes, we've gone to the poultry farm. We've gone to the vegetable farm, but there's also indoor farming. And I must say we had a fabulous time with this guest lecturer. He was dressed like the young people. He had the energy, he had the lingo. He actually connected with the students better than I do. But there's just a different vibe in the classroom. And even after he had left, we had some very interesting conversations. Some students I didn't even know were interested in aquaculture and things like that. And so just generating that interest. And then so saying that those classroom connections that the students have with the community also go back into sometimes informing the research that they do and working with community partners as well. And then, so there's another aspect. So while this is what it looks like to me, and trying to work with students, and also me learning, part of the process is, what about the global connections? So again, to cut the long story short, I had someone introduced me to someone, and that ended up with these two contacts from Midland State University and Fiji National University. And we're like, okay, we're all doing sustainable education for sustainable development. What does it look like for Fiji? What does it look like for you at Midland State University? And how can we collaborate, right? We are doing all these local things with our students, but how can we work together, right? And maybe, help each other in the classroom, making those connections. So, my Fiji contact said, you know what, we are just starting. We just joined ASHI. I have a group of students who are wanting to start like a campus group. And I was like, we have the Green Fund. Definitely you can get some connections there, and they can, have those meaningful partnerships as well. So that those partnerships we want to see at a higher level, where we say, President Biden is talking to President Jinping or President Mnangagwa from Zimbabwe. They are supposed to be cultivated through education for sustainable development at a lower level, kind of getting those conversations and showing our students how that looks like. So for Fiji, this is what they are doing. They are just starting and going out, cleaning up. So this is they're doing a community cleanup, and then also doing some trench repairing, agriculture in their area. But for Midland State University, this is the Department of Social Work. They have their students, both undergraduate and graduate program, doing field work placement, which is internship here. And they work mainly with the development agencies. But then the challenge is they have limited access to current literature. We have access to a lot of the literature on sustainable development. And of course, the challenge of poor internet connectivity. So these are some of the things that we're talking about. Okay, so how can we help? How can we support each other? And also that most of where the students go for the internship are agencies that have funding sources that have other areas of interest, not necessarily sustainable development. So those are some of the challenges that they've actually highlighted. So this is in the very beginning stages, but I'm kind of looking forward to also having our students kind of even connect in the virtual space, maybe doing guest lectures for each other's classes and talking about connecting the local actions to the global, what other universities are doing. And that's actually what we are looking at. So this is the end of my talk, and thank you all for listening. And I do have some sources for some of the references here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Chitiyo. It was a pleasure to hear your presentation. It's just so inspiring to hear about all the work that you have done from the classroom today, connecting the local to the global, but also how your story, your background has influenced your approach to educational sustainable development. So thank you very much for sharing all of these stories, your insights. It's very motivating for me also as I teach undergrad's intro to urban planning. How can I connect students to real world projects that are occurring in the community, especially as we touch on topics related to climate change and sustainability and equity. So in these last 10 minutes, we'd like to ask some questions. I do have a question to jumpstart the conversation, and then I'll open it up to those on the chat. So one of my first questions here on our list is actually a question that was posed by Dr. Catherine Idzurek. Dr. Idzurek mentions it is very inspiring to learn about the site visits you described and hearing student reactions. Have you found that these experiences have opened students up to new ways of learning and are engaging with their communities around sustainability beyond their academic studies?
That's a great question. I think, so I've got, the feedback that I've got, sometimes it's those students who come back to me just before we started this, I just got on the online here on Zoom. A student texted me, she took this class, so that was the first class I taught when I moved to UNCG. And she's like, I have a book that I want you to share with your class. And when she graduated, she wanted to go to vet school. She was so sad. She's like, I'm going to vet school and that's it. But well, she started growing things on her balcony and then got connected to a community garden and then went back to the farmer's market and was volunteering there. And she's like, nah, I'm an environmental educator. She just got a job with the city of Greensboro as an environmental educator. So those are some of the things. And there's one thing that one student said. She said, when we go out there, I get to know my classmates better. I think for them, the students, they get to interact more than they would have been if I had just had them in class. So I think, to further, maybe I would say the examples that I have are just what they do, like when they went back. Yeah, there's another one. I just remembered. We visited a farm where it was an African-American family, young family, and they just, went into farming. They didn't have prior experience, but they are absolutely outstanding, what they've acquired for the past 3 years, what they've done with their farm. And so when we got there, I did not know that one of the students grew up in New York. And the farmer is from New York. So they're like, oh, wow, you're from New York. Oh, that's where I grew up. And I did not know that she went back. So they were actually acting as like a mentor to the student. And then she mentioned it in passing, like, oh yeah, I'm going back, and we are connecting that way. So I guess those are some of the, if they don't say it, I probably would not know. But those are kind of the examples that I have.
Great, thank you so much. I did want to open it up to others on the call. Perhaps if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself or write it in the chat. I do see some students too. Maybe some students want to ask some questions about how about Dr. Chitiyo's work. If not, I can jump into a list of other questions I have here.
Sure.
Another question by Dr. Fuchsia Hoover, actually, who had to leave to teach class, but she is very thankful for your presentation as well. She asked, you highlight the way you have learned as you go, identifying the gaps in your understanding of the problem, improving your research approach based on community feedback, etc. And for projects where you were working with other collaborators and organizations, how were you able to adapt your approach in the moment?
Oh, I guess it was, I feel like for me, I remember having this conversation with another professor in English at Duquesne. I was like, I feel like I was just going around, like I'm trying to figure this thing by myself. But I think I was open to change. I was open to hear what other people's views on certain things that I viewed important, or my research interest. So for example, my training, so agriculture background, and then policy, environmental policy, but then maybe get into a meeting where someone is talking about, I can give an example, like right now at UNCG, one of my colleagues that I work closely with, his thing is aesthetics. So he makes me see another aspect that I probably would not have thought about. So the ethics and the morals and how the humanities side is also important in this discussion, right? So you have maybe scientists working with the humanities, that it's an area that has been neglected, or equity issues have really been on the other side. And I must say, when I was in Pittsburgh, the level of even some of the people that the community gardeners that I worked with highlighted the issues around equity, around food. It was much more, it's different from reading from a book than talking to someone, and they share those experiences, I must say. So I guess for me, it was just being open to hearing what they have to say. And look at things from their own perspective as well, and saying, okay, how can we work together? How can we support each other? Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Zuniga, you're muted.
After a couple of years, is still not used to it. But one question that I have are the institutional barriers. This work sounds amazing, and it's great that you're at an institution that could support you with this kind of work. But I have to imagine that there may have been some institutional barriers, perhaps in relation to, staff capacity, or maybe not enough funding. What kind of institutional barriers did you face, and how did you overcome them?
But some of them I haven't overcome them. That's a great question. This idea of capacity and support, I must say, I attended a webinar, the HESI, Higher Education Sustainable Initiative, last summer, and I was just blown away by that, a lot of universities. So there's no buy-in from a higher level for most institutions. And if you, for us, it's an interdisciplinary program. So we are working with faculty from different programs who are already committed to their program, but we want to have our students to have this experience. So the challenge now is, they're supposed to teach two classes in their program, and they're coming and picking up another class. And while we might cross-list those, still, I think the challenge of not having enough resources, human resources and funding. And it's something that is, I find also from talking to other people, that it's kind of in most institutions. So I feel like for sustainability, how there is support for certain things at campuses where we are saying, we don't even negotiate, when students are taking, for example, social justice, they're supposed to take a social justice class, right? There's not that sense with sustainability type of thing. And so it really maybe falls onto, that person who has that interest in most cases, they end up juggling a lot more, is what I can say. So I say in some ways is finding creative ways, for example, cross-listing some of those classes, working on projects with some of those professors from other departments, so that it's not like we're exploiting them to just come and teach our class, but finding ways we can work together that way, and they can teach some of the classes in the program. But on the other side, realizing that there are in some cases where we don't have the funding, we don't have the resources, and we are overwhelmed, and so we are limited on what we can do. So for some, I haven't conquered everything. I just work with what's kind of workable as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Chitiyo. I do see we do have another question. So if you all have to jump off the call, that is understandable, but perhaps you could stay on the line just for a few more minutes.
Sure. Sure.
But at any rate, if you have to leave, thank you so much for participating in our speaker series. But the last question I have here is from Zed Bates. And Zed Bates, you can feel free to unmute yourself too, or I'll read it on the chat. So students seem to come out of this experience with a different frame of mind, which is amazing. However, when they get into the organizations and workspaces that resist new approaches, are there support systems outside of academia to help fortify their minds and ambitions? Do you address policy change strategies in the course as well?
That's a great question. It's a great question. And I don't have an answer. I mean, I can say one of the things that we do in the class is kind of highlight some of those challenges. And I think another thing that we don't see with these, some of the things that I was highlighting is we are dealing with human beings. we are dealing with people. And I can tell you that sometimes I've been to that farm or to that garden and they are late, right? Or to that meeting, because that's just how, stuff is, they are not there. And it's, and then you look at also, so I don't want to paint a picture that it's easy. It is not. It is not working with people. And I think what I can do in my class is just to kind of have like a realistic view and let them know what it is like out there. Just this other day, a student asked, she said, I really want to get into farming. But from what we discussed, we're discussing right now, I'm really I'm not encouraged at all. But I must say that I guess having the networks, one of the things that I remind students is you need to be connected to other organizations. And I think that's one of the things that I see the strength in some of these farms, the farms that are promoting sustainable agriculture. They are plugged in. I mean, they are connected. They are, for some farms that we have actually, I was just introduced to one when I moved here, but to see the network, like, oh yeah, we know them. We gave them some piglets because they didn't have. Or we know them, we gave them some seedlings. I'm going to do a training and I just said, come over. We are just going to you're not going to pay anything. And so I guess those would help in a way. But I do acknowledge that challenge sometimes where, organizations are not open to change. Yeah, it does exist. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much again, Dr. Chitiyo, for your time, for sharing your expertise, your stories. This has been a great presentation. And if we can all give a round of applause to Dr. Chitiyo. And I hope for the day to meet you in person one day. We're both in the UNC system, so hopefully we can cross paths sometime. But thank you again. And thank you to all the participants as well who joined us. We really appreciate your presence here.
Thank you so much. And, thank you. Like I said, it's an honor. And I know, people are busy, but I really thank you all for coming and, those great questions. They also challenge me to think about, things that I might also overlook. But I really appreciate this has been exciting I now know, when I hear UNC Charlotte, I say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so. So this is really great. And like what you're saying, in future, looking forward to future opportunities when we can actually meet in person. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.